Have you ever looked in the mirror and asked yourself, how did I let her treat me like that? You gave her everything, yet in return she pulled away, acted cold, disrespected your efforts, and took you for granted like you were replaceable. But what happens when you go completely off the radar? When you cut the access, stop responding, and walk away? No drama, no begging, no explanations, just gone. This is when the truth starts to eat her alive. The truth is, they never thought you'd leave. They never imagined you had it in you. Because most men don't. Most men cling. But the second you stop trying and start building, everything changes. In this video, you're about to discover 10 brutal truths a woman realizes when you disappear, and why by the time she regrets everything, it's already too late. If you're tired of being the one chasing, explaining, hoping, drop a comment right now that says, "I'm done being an option." And if you want to reclaim your power, your value, your life, listen to every single word. This isn't just about her. This is about you becoming a man no one can take lightly again. Number 1. She never expected you to leave. She grows up watching men chase, plead, apologize for things they didn't do, bend themselves into unrecognizable shapes just to keep a woman slightly interested. And so by the time you come into her life, she already assumes you'll be no different. You'll chase, overextend, tolerate her moods, compete with her phone, adjust to her emotional games, and thank her for crumbs of affection, because that's what she's been conditioned to believe men do. And the sick truth is that it works on most men. They stay even when it hurts, and the more she withdraws, the more desperate they become, because they don't see themselves as the prize. They see her as the reward they're terrified of losing. But you're different, not because you said you were, but because when she started playing the same tired game, ignoring texts, canceling plans last minute, throwing passive-aggressive comments, making you feel like you had to earn your place, you didn't react with more effort. You responded with silence. You watched the disrespect, noted it once and left, and that shook her entire perception of reality, because men don't just leave, right? Not without closure, not without drama, not without some fight or breakdown or last-ditch effort to explain, but you did, and now she's waking up every morning, checking her phone, rereading old messages, wondering how a man she assumed was just another option became the ghost that now owns her mind, because she wasn't prepared for the kind of man who values his time, his peace, and his energy more than he values chasing a woman who's too distracted to recognize his worth. And now that you're gone, not half gone, not threatening to leave, not emotionally manipulative about disappearing, but really gone, she's spiraling. Because it's not just about the fact that you're not there, it's about what your absence says. That she wasn't special enough to keep you, that her behavior wasn't cute like she thought, that her tests didn't faze you, that her emotional detachment was never leverage. It was the very thing that cost her a high-value man, and now she's re-evaluating everything because she thought pulling back would make you try harder, not vanish without a word. And what hurts most is knowing she doesn't get another chance. No second shot, no apology tour, just the brutal reality that she played herself, and now you're out of reach. Not because of revenge, not out of bitterness, but because you finally realized what most men don't until it's too late. That walking away isn't weakness, it's power, and that you don't need closure when the disrespect speaks loud enough. And this is the shift where most men finally reclaim their peace. Because when you stop begging for her time, you start demanding more from your life. And when you disappear without announcement, explanation, or emotional outburst, it leaves a scar she never expected. And that's where your transformation begins, because now you're no longer reacting to her, you're building you, and she's just the memory that taught you what not to tolerate again. And if you're wondering how to reach this level of detachment and control, it starts by getting brutally honest about the fact that she's not special if she doesn't treat you special. It continues by prioritizing your fitness, your money, your mission, and your circle. And it ends when you stop viewing her as the prize and start viewing her as the test. And the test ends the moment you choose you, because she never expected you to leave. And now she's stuck replaying every moment, trying to figure out how she lost a man who was never supposed to wake up, but did, and walked. And now that you've stepped into that power, choosing yourself, walking away without looking back, you need to stay there, grounded, unshakable. That's why the Stoic relationship blueprint exists. It's not just a book, it's the manual you never got, the guide to protect your peace, understand your worth, and navigate every relationship with unbreakable clarity. You've felt the pain of being taken for granted. Are you ready to master the art of never being put in that position again? This isn't temporary motivation. This is a blueprint for life. The moment you get it, it's yours forever. Every principle, every truth, every reminder that your value doesn't need validation. It's linked in the comments. Own it, study it, keep it. Because real change doesn't come from rage, it comes from wisdom. And this blueprint is the wisdom most men never get until it's too late. Number 2. Her ego took you for granted. She walks through the world assuming she's irreplaceable, not because of who she is, but because of how many men have reinforced that illusion by simping for her attention, liking every filtered photo, begging for replies, doing mental gymnastics to excuse her flaky behavior. And so when you entered her life and gave your heart, your effort, your consistency, she labeled it not as love, but as desperation, because in her world, the more a man does, the less value he holds. And that's why she started pulling back, giving less, responding slower, waiting hours to reply to your message, even though she read it instantly, just to see if you'd still care, still wait, still chase. And most men do. They double text, they over-explain, they apologize for asking for consistency. But you didn't. You stayed calm, observed the pattern, didn't react emotionally, and then slowly started removing your energy. Not in petty revenge, but in quiet recognition that her ego doesn't allow her to see past her own reflection. And that's when everything changed, because the moment her power game didn't work, she panicked. Not outwardly, no, she still posted selfies with quotes about being unbothered and choosing peace. But deep down, she felt the shift, because her entire self-worth was built on the assumption that she could mistreat a man, and he'd still stay. And now she's watching you elevate, glow up, transform, and worst of all, not look back, and that destroys her. Not because she loved you deeply, but because she used you for significance. And now that you're gone, she's forced to face the fact that maybe she wasn't as special as she thought. Maybe her looks weren't enough. Maybe her games were predictable. And that's the part she can't process, because her ego has never been tested like this before. Most men feed it, but you starved it, and now it's screaming. And if you want to become the man who dismantles that illusion, you must stop rewarding bad behavior. You must stop giving energy to women who give you indifference. You must stop proving your worth to someone who's blind to it. And instead, put all that energy into your purpose, your business, your health, your mind, your tribe. Because the more you feed you, the less power she has. And the truth is, her ego didn't love you. It loved the validation you provided, and when that supply is cut, she crumbles, because you weren't just another guy. You were the mirror she didn't want to look into, the man who saw through her persona and walked away anyway. And that is the ultimate ego death for someone who's used to always being chased. And it teaches you the most powerful lesson of all, that your value isn't determined by how much you tolerate, it's proven by how quickly you walk when respect is absent. And in that moment, you shift from being the fool who waited to the king she can never reach again, because once a man stops serving her ego, she starts to realize how little she actually had to offer in the first place, and that truth burns. Number 3. She realizes you were the prize. She only begins to understand your worth after you're gone, not when you were breaking your back to make her feel seen, not when you stayed up nights helping her navigate her emotions, Not when you forgave things you knew you shouldn't have, just to keep the peace. But after your presence disappears, after your patience wears thin, after your silence becomes the loudest message she's ever received, because in her world, men who care always stick around, always come back, always wait. But when you don't, when you vanish, not to make a point, but because you've finally seen through the illusion, she's left to face a truth she's avoided her whole life. That the real prize was the man she thought would never leave. And now she's looking back at all the things you did, the way you spoke life into her when no one else did, the way you saw her when she couldn't even see herself, and it starts hitting her all at once. But the door she left open with arrogance is now slammed shut with indifference, because you've grown into a version of yourself that no longer desires the approval of someone who once made you feel like an afterthought, and it stings. Not because she lost love, but because she finally sees the value of what she threw away. And now her mind replays every moment she brushed you off, every passive-aggressive jab, every night she made you feel invisible. And it's all too late, because the man you were back then isn't the man you are now. You've evolved, elevated, detached, and she's stuck in the past, holding onto a version of you she can never access again. And that's where your strength is born, because you realize you were never the beggar in this story. You were the blessing, and all it took was distance to see it clearly. And if you want to be the man she regrets losing, not for a week, not for a season, but for the rest of her life, then stop trying to prove yourself to anyone who doesn't recognize your value up front. Stop trying to convince someone that you're good enough. Stop betraying yourself for people who wouldn't cross a street for you, and start living like the prize. Focus on your mind, your health, your discipline, your goals, your peace, your financial freedom, and most importantly, your standards. Because when you embody all of that, when you become undeniable, the tables flip, and the ones who once made you feel small now watch you from the sidelines, hoping to be acknowledged again. And that's not revenge, it's restoration. It's you stepping into your power, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. And the truth is, if she didn't value you when you were at your most available, she never deserved to be around when you became your most powerful. And you need to remember that every time you feel the urge to reach out, every time nostalgia tries to lie to you, every time loneliness whispers to go back, because going back means becoming less, and your life is no longer about making her see your worth. It's about making yourself so valuable that even the thought of your name is a reminder of what she'll never have again. Number 4. Her replacement fantasy fails. She believes there's always something better waiting around the corner, that if she leaves you, there'll be another man lined up, better looking, more money, more status, more attention to offer, because that's the lie society feeds her daily through validation loops and simps in her DMs. And so when things get tough or mundane, or you start holding her accountable, her mind wanders to the fantasy. The idea that she can replace you effortlessly, upgrade without consequences, move on without grief, and she begins to distance herself emotionally while still enjoying your benefits, all while scanning the horizon for the next high, the next man, the next dopamine rush. And when she finally cuts ties, emboldened by the support of friends who tell her she deserves more, by TikToks telling her she's a queen, she steps into the world ready to find someone better. But slowly, painfully, she realizes that the men lining up don't see her soul, don't want her complexity, don't value her story. They want her body, her image, her compliance, and nothing more. And she begins to understand that what you offered wasn't just consistency, but connection, not just effort, but emotional investment. And now she tries to replicate that with strangers who couldn't care less. She tries to recreate the warmth, the inside jokes, the depth, the quiet mornings, the way you understood her silence, the way you challenged her when she was wrong without breaking her spirit. But it's not there, because what you gave came from character, from discipline, from truth. And you can't replace that with lust or charm, or a rebound guy who has nothing going for him beyond a few compliments and a gym membership. And as she scrolls through her messages, hoping for someone to fill the gap, She finds herself coming back to the chats with you, rereading the things you said, the way you believed in her, the way you fought for her even when she was being difficult. And that's when the regret begins to eat her alive. Not because she misses you romantically, but because she realizes she destroyed the only real connection she ever had, chasing an illusion that didn't exist. And now she's stuck posting curated smiles while slowly unraveling behind the screen, while you're rising, glowing, growing, and not even checking up on her. And that's when the replacement fantasy truly fails, because it wasn't just about finding someone else. It was about believing she could walk away from value and find it again immediately. But now that she sees most men are emotionally vacant, transactional, self-serving, she begins to see how rare you were, how deeply you felt, how strong your presence was. And it breaks her to know that she let her ego and false expectations convince her that you were just another man. And if you're reading this thinking about how you were replaced so quickly, understand this. It was never about you being inadequate. It was about her believing the lie that the grass is greener, and the best revenge isn't confrontation. It isn't arguments or closure. It's silence. It's peace. It's watching her realize in real time that the man she thought she could replace became the standard she can never touch again. And your job is not to wait for that moment, but to use the betrayal, the abandonment, the confusion as fuel to become so undeniably valuable that your name alone triggers reflection, that your absence creates discomfort, that your level becomes unreachable. And if you want to build that version of yourself, start by detaching emotionally from women who don't reciprocate your investment. Start by waking up early, journaling your goals, building your body, learning your craft, saving your money, cutting out the noise, and training your mind to not react to temporary emotions. Because when you start choosing purpose over people, mission over lust, solitude over low standards, you will become the kind of man whose silence speaks louder than anyone else's presence. And she'll try to replace you. But her fantasy will always crumble under the weight of your reality, because you were never average, you were just unrecognized until now. Number 5. The absence speaks volumes. She doesn't understand what it means to lose you until your presence turns into pure silence. Not the type that waits for a response, not the kind that watches her stories or leaves a subtle like on an old post hoping she sees you, but real, absolute, intentional absence. And it's in that void that her illusions crumble, because when you were around, she could take your consistency for granted. She could misinterpret your patience for weakness, your empathy for neediness, your availability for desperation. But now, she's forced to sit in the discomfort of a space where your voice, your energy, your interest no longer exist, and every day that passes without a text, a call, a reaction, she gets a little more unsettled, not because she's in love, but because the attention she used to rely on to prop up her ego is gone, and that silence starts to echo in her head at all hours. When she wakes up and doesn't see your name, when she goes out and realizes you're not watching, when she posts something passive-aggressive and no response comes, and it drives her into a mental spiral she'll never admit to, because the modern woman believes she's entitled to your emotional labor without reciprocation. And when that disappears, the illusion of control shatters. And you must understand this isn't about revenge or mind games. It's about preservation. Because your energy is currency, and the more you give it to someone who doesn't value it, the more broke you become inside. So when you remove yourself, not as a tactic, but as a transformation, the absence becomes a mirror she can't escape, and the truth stares back at her. She was never the one holding things together. It was you, the man she dismissed, the man she doubted, the man she left unread. And now that you're gone, everything feels off, and she can't fix it with a new guy, a cute caption, or a night out, because none of that replaces the soul she discarded, thinking it would always return. And the key here is consistency in your absence. Don't break, don't peak, don't stalk, just build. And while you build, she decays in confusion. because nothing torments a woman more than knowing she misjudged a man who actually loved her and now has no access to him. And if you're wondering how to reach this level of detachment, it begins with shifting your mindset from "I need her to see my value" to "I need me to see my value." It's writing down your standards, holding yourself accountable, surrounding yourself with men who don't tolerate disrespect. It's training your mind to stop reacting emotionally and start moving with discipline, because your silence must come from inner peace, not emotional turmoil. And when it does, it becomes the loudest statement you'll ever make, because the same way she underestimated you when you were present is the same way she will overthink you when you are absent. And while she drowns in that uncertainty, you rise, not in arrogance but in purpose, and that is when the man becomes untouchable. Number 6. Social media can't heal her. She opens her phone and starts the performance, scrolling through filters, selecting the best angles, curating a story that screams, "I'm thriving," because she's been conditioned to believe that appearances equal reality. And if she can convince the world she's moved on, maybe she can convince herself. But what she doesn't realize is that no amount of likes, fire emojis, or validation from men she doesn't care about will ever replace the value of the man who saw her without makeup, who knew her fears, who watched her break down and didn't flinch. And now that man is no longer watching, no longer reacting, no longer sending those "hope you're okay" texts when she'd disappear. And that void is something no filter can cover, no story can suppress, because now she posts for attention but receives none from the only source that ever mattered. And the truth hits her hardest when the dopamine wears off, when the story expires and no message from you comes, when her friends say, "You look amazing," but it feels hollow, because behind every post is a silent cry, "Why did he stop caring?" And you must understand that this is your power, not in manipulation, but in maturity. Because when you no longer seek validation from her or her reactions, you reclaim every ounce of energy you once gave so freely, and her ego starts to starve, because it's not that she wants you, it's that she can't stand that you no longer want her. And that realization keeps her up at night scrolling through her own content, wondering why it isn't working anymore. But your strength lies in your indifference, in your focus on self-growth, in your refusal to be pulled back into a game that you've already outgrown. Because every time you view her story, every time you like that post, you feed the illusion that she still holds real estate in your mind. But when you disappear from her feed the same way you disappeared from her life, she feels it. And there's no replacement, no backup plan, no rebound guy that can silence the noise of a man who used to see her soul, but now doesn't even glance at her highlights. And if you want to become that man, delete her from your algorithms, remove her from your digital orbit, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Because the more you starve your mind of distractions, the more space you make for discipline. And this is where you begin to dominate. Not just in relationships, but in life. And the more you grow in silence, the more she feels it. Because while she's busy trying to make it seem like she's better off, deep down she's haunted by the knowledge that no amount of curated moments can recreate the realness of what you brought to her life. And as long as you remain unbothered, unavailable, and unreachable, she will remain trapped in the loop of trying to perform happiness while feeling empty. Because social media is a stage, but your absence is reality, and nothing she posts can undo that truth. Number 7. Her friends can't fill the void. At first she laughs with them, wine in hand, filters on, throwing shade about how you were doing too much, about how she deserves better, about how she's moving on. But when the night ends, when the music stops and the friends go home to their own distractions, she lies in bed alone, staring at the same phone that once buzzed with your affirmations, your check-ins, your late-night vulnerability, and now offers nothing but silence. And the absence burns deeper. Not just because you're gone, but because no one in her circle can replicate the presence you brought. And it's in these quiet moments that she begins to understand the difference between company and connection, because her friends are there for gossip, for validation, for noise, but not for depth. not for grounding, not for truth, and you represented all three. And as much as they hype her up and post bad beach energy captions on her photos, none of them are there when her mask slips, when she realizes that none of the people cheering her on ever truly understood her like you did, and the truth she refuses to speak out loud is that she feels more alone now, surrounded by 10 voices, than she ever did sitting silently next to you. And here's the kicker. Her friends never had to deal with the consequences of her choices. They just amplified the ego that told her to walk away from the man who would have stayed. And now they're still telling her she did the right thing, even as she wakes up every day feeling more disconnected, more unsure, more empty. And this is your advantage. Not because her pain is your pleasure, but because your absence created a vacuum that no girl gang can fill. And it's in that vacuum where she's forced to confront reality, to sit with the fact that the man she let go wasn't just another guy, but a rare, grounded force who saw past her performance and chose to connect anyway. And now that energy is gone, and every time she hears your name or sees someone who reminds her of your discipline, your focus, your calm, she feels the ache of knowing her friends pushed her to let go of something they never understood. And your power in this moment is to never return, to let her feel the void, not as a punishment, but as a consequence. And if you want to become the man whose absence echoes louder than their collective cheers, then stop explaining yourself to people who aren't accountable for her heartbreak. Stop seeking validation from those who co-signed your replacement, and start investing in a version of yourself who doesn't wait for apologies, who doesn't chase closure, who understands that her friends were part of the test, and you passed the moment you walked away because you were never just fighting for her attention. You were up against the noise of shallow voices cheering her into self-destruction, and the only way to win was to leave her with them, to let her realize over time that quantity never replaces quality, that attention never replaces depth, and that no one in her circle could ever become what you already were. And that realization will haunt her long after the friendship bracelets fall apart. Number 8. The emotional high is gone. She was addicted to how you made her feel. Whether she admitted it or not, you were her stability, her emotional dopamine, her escape from the empty validation loops of social media and superficial guys who said the right things but never showed up. And even if she complained about you, even if she picked fights or acted cold or distant, she knew on a deep, primal level that your energy made her feel safe, seen, and grounded. And the moment you removed that energy, the crash began. Not all at once, not immediately, but gradually, like withdrawal from a drug she didn't know she was hooked on. And suddenly, the things she used to enjoy start feeling dull. The laughter isn't as real, the compliments don't stick, the conversations don't land, because you weren't just a momentary high, you were a constant. And now that emotional rhythm has flatlined, and she's chasing the ghost of what it felt like to have a man truly care, not just desire her, not just flirt, but care deeply. And the thing that drives her mad is that she can't replicate it. Not with new guys, not with friends, not with social media, because those things don't provide the internal regulation she got from your presence. And now every distraction becomes a reminder that she messed up something real trying to chase temporary stimulation. And what's worse, the men she turns to now are often cold, transactional, emotionally unavailable, or just playing a part to get what they want, and none of them care about her bad day, or the way she zones out when she's overwhelmed, or the thoughts she hides behind sarcasm. And you did, and that's what's gone now. And while you focus on your goals, your body, your peace, she's spiraling in a cycle of emotional whiplash, one moment laughing, the next overthinking, the next comparing every man she meets to a standard she never respected until it was gone. And the emotional crash deepens because she knows it's her fault, but pride keeps her from saying it. And your role in this story is not to come back when she realizes it, not to save her from the consequences of her decisions, but to become the kind of man who understands that emotional power isn't about dominance, it's about presence, and when you give it freely, you become her emotional crutch. But when you remove it, you force her to either grow or spiral, and most spiral because the truth is, emotional maturity isn't common, and you were the outlier. And if you want to become that man consistently, stop giving your depth to women who only want surface. Stop attaching your self-worth to whether she gets it, and start living in alignment with your own truth, your own mission, your own inner peace. Because when you're the kind of man who knows the emotional impact he has and chooses to protect it, you don't just walk away. You leave an imprint that no one else can match, and she'll try, she'll search, she'll post, she'll pretend, but deep down she'll always feel the void. Because you weren't just her emotional high, you were the entire baseline, and without you, everything feels numb. Number 9. She's haunted by what if. Every woman who loses a man who genuinely cared but finally stopped chasing lives with a phantom. That quiet, persistent, aching thought that creeps in when the lights go off, when her phone doesn't buzz, when she sees your name in an old contact list or scrolls past an old photo she forgot to delete. And that thought is, what if I hadn't pushed him away? And it never shows up during the loud moments, never while she's out pretending she's better off, never while she's surrounded by noise and distractions, but always, without fail, when she's alone, when everything slows down, and it starts with small things. Hearing a song you both used to vibe to, seeing a guy with your build in public, remembering the way you used to speak to her like she mattered, and suddenly the narrative she created to justify leaving you begins to fall apart, and she starts questioning whether the things she thought were red flags were just signs of your depth, whether the things she called controlling were just your standards, whether the flaws she magnified were just excuses she told herself because she didn't feel ready to receive real love. And that's when it sinks in, not all at once, but in waves, that she didn't just lose a man, she lost the man who saw her beyond her facade, and now she replays every moment she dismissed, every apology you gave that she mocked, every effort you made that she brushed off like it was nothing, and she starts wondering if you were really as bad as her friends made you out to be, or if they were just speaking from their own bitterness. And the guilt is suffocating, not because she misses your presence every second, but because she realizes she took something rare and treated it like it was replaceable. And now she's stuck wondering what could have been if she had just seen clearly. And the worst part is that she knows the door is closed, not because you said it, but because your actions did. And the man she thought would always be there is now building, winning, thriving, and not even thinking about her. And that realization is a psychological torment, because the human brain craves closure, but you gave her none, and your silence has become the screen on which her mind plays the what-if reel on loop, and she can't escape it because you were the constant she took for granted, and now every man who comes after you has to fight a ghost he can't see, because even if she doesn't talk about it, even if she acts like she's healed, deep down she compares them all to you, and none of them make her feel the way you did. And if you want to become the man who lives rent-free in her psyche, it starts by understanding that your true power isn't in confrontation, it's in self-respect. It's in letting her lose you without argument, without revenge, without begging, and redirecting every ounce of that emotional energy into building a life that reflects your worth. Because when you choose growth over validation, discipline over desperation, detachment over dysfunction, you become the man she never truly knew until she lost. And that truth will chase her far longer than you ever did. And if you've ever doubted your decision to walk away, remember this. Regret is the price she pays for disrespect, and your only job is to make sure that the life you build in her absence is so elevated, so unshakable, so peaceful, that even if she does reach out, she doesn't recognize the man you've become, and that's the point. Number 10. She finally sees her own damage. There comes a moment, after the noise dies down and the replacement fails and the stories dry up, when she looks in the mirror and can't lie to herself anymore, when the excuses she's rehearsed stop sounding convincing, even to her, and she starts to confront the one thing she spent so long avoiding, herself. And in that silence, in that raw honesty, she begins to see the role she played in the downfall of something that could have changed her life. Because for the first time, she's not pointing fingers, not blaming your temper or your mistakes or your delivery. She's looking at the way she self-sabotaged, the way she pushed away someone who only wanted to love her right. And it's ugly, because it's easier to call you toxic than to admit she was immature. It's easier to label you controlling than to admit she had no emotional discipline. It's easier to say you were too intense than to admit she was terrified of being seen. And now she's stuck in the aftermath of her own behavior, surrounded by men who want her body but not her burdens. Men who say the right things but vanish the moment things get real. And she starts realizing that